Paris, the night seemed calm, but the hearts of millions of ARMY around the world were not in the same state. In a previously unannounced Weverse live broadcast, Kim Taehyung suddenly appeared on the screen with a tired face, a sad look, and an uncharacteristic expression. There was no special laughter, no sweet jokes that he used to throw at the beginning of the broadcast. There was only a long silence before his first sentence came out, a sentence that left thousands of spectators instantly speechless. "I know you all saw what happened at the airport, and I think it's time for me to talk." One by one, the ARMY watching began to realize that this was no ordinary broadcast. Taehyung wasn't in a bad mood. He seemed hesitant to speak, as if there was a great burden that he had endured for a long time. Many suspect this is the breaking point of the pressure that so far can only be translated in a fake smile or a forced laugh. The incident at Incheon Airport a few days earlier had become a hot topic of polemic among fans, media, and even critics of South Korea's entertainment industry. At that time, Taehyung was scheduled to leave for Paris to attend a famous fashion event. However, his presence at the airport turned into chaos. Hundreds of fans, mostly ARMY who had been waiting since morning, crowded the arrival area, trying to get closer, shouting Taehyung's name, and taking pictures from all directions. Some of them even attempted to touch him, overwhelming the security ranks. In the chaos, Taehyung's facial expression was recorded that looked tense, even had time to cast a sharp look at the camera and staff who blocked his path. A short clip of the incident immediately went viral, causing mixed reactions. Some blamed fans for pushing interactions too hard. Others said Taehyung seemed angry and disrespectful, while others questioned why the agency didn't set up tighter security. All opinions milled, but the most hurtful to Taehyung came precisely from those whom he had always considered a refuge, loyal fans. At that time, "I'm not doing well," Taehyung said softly on his live broadcast. "I don't want to make anyone afraid or sad, but I feel like I can't breathe. As you all screamed my name, I just felt smaller and more suffocated." Taehyung admitted that that day he was in a fragile mental state, not only because of a busy schedule or physical fatigue, but because there are personal things that interfere with his mind. He did not go into details, but his tone showed that this was not just a momentary pressure. "I don't want to be cold, but I'm also not a statue that can smile all the time," he said, holding his breath. The confession made thousands of ARMY instantly flood the comments with words of support, but it was then that the most moving moment of the broadcast occurred. Taehyung pauses, opens his phone screen, and unknowingly reveals a message notification. Although it only appeared briefly on the screen, it clearly read, "I'm watching your broadcast. Hyung, why didn't you tell me from the beginning? I'm here, I know you." The sender? None other than Jungkook. Instantly, the emotions that Taehyung had been locked in for so long burst out. He looked down, wiped away the tears that began to flow, then laughed a little and said, "He always does know before I say anything." According to a source from their close environment, Jungkook, who is currently serving in the ARMY, had asked his superiors for permission to access the live broadcast because he was worried since the Incheon incident occurred. And when he saw Taehyung speak, he couldn't hold back the tears. One of Jungkook's close friends said, "He was very emotional. Taehyung is a person who means a lot to Jungkook." Seeing Taehyung attacked by public opinion when he was fragile made Jungkook cry. This reaction reveals a deeper connection between the two. A connection built not from camera highlights or stage interactions, but rather from decades of friendship, mutual understanding, and tacitly shared wounds. "Jungkook may not be able to be here right now, but I know he's always listening," Taehyung said before closing the broadcast. That sentence felt like a direct message not just to the fans, but to Jungkook, who was watching quietly somewhere far away. The Korean media, which initially reported on the events in Incheon with a controversial point of view, has now begun to change the narrative. Opinion columns began to appear, praising Taehyung's courage to speak up and expose the human side of an idol. One article from a well-known newspaper wrote, "Kim Taehyung is not just a star, He is the mirror of millions of young people who keep wounds in silence. Taehyung has opened the door to honesty, and Jungkook, despite being far away, remained the silent guard behind that door. Now the question is, after this there will be a broadcast from Jungkook responding to Taehyung's statement? Or will he write an open letter to the army as a form of solidarity? What is clear is that, whatever their next steps, the public now knows that behind the glitter of the stage, behind the fame, there is such a sincere and fragile relationship between two friends who take care of each other even in silence. And all of us are now witnesses to a true story that goes deeper than just the incident at the airport, a story of wounds that were finally given room to heal. However, as the euphoria and emotions begin to subside, a number of facts behind this horrendous news begin to come to light. Slowly but surely, critical fans, professional media, and trusted sources began to unravel the knot of sensational news that had burned ARMY's emotions around the world. And one painful conclusion arises. Many parts of this news turned out to be untrue. The first and most striking is the message from Jungkook that is said to appear in Taehyung's live broadcast. After a thorough search of the broadcast video by fans and video analysts, there was no clear visual evidence of incoming message notifications from Jungkook. The screenshots that went viral turned out to be edits, coming from fan accounts that deliberately added captions for the purpose of fanfiction or dramatic speculation. Although many ARMY believed immediately because his emotions were running high, the fact is that the message never appeared in the original broadcast. There is no evidence that Jungkook sent any private messages while Taehyung was live, streaming, especially given Jungkook's current status as an active-duty conscript, making his access to social media extremely limited and closely monitored. Second, reports that Jungkook shed tears after watching Taehyung's broadcast also came from anonymous accounts on social media, not from reliable sources or official statements of related parties. The account claimed to be a close friend of Jungkook, but could not be verified. There was no confirmation, either from HYB or official Korean media, that Jungkook was involved or responding directly to Taehyung's broadcast. The sentence, "Jungkook cried while watching Taehyung's broadcast," turns out to be just an emotional narrative built to reinforce the dramatic impression that is not necessarily real. Third, the incident at Incheon Airport did happen, but a number of media outlets confirmed that Taehyung's expression that looked cold or angry was not directed at the fans, but at the security forces who failed to manage the crowd properly. Some of the ARMY who were present at the scene defended Taehyung, saying that he still greeted politely despite the pressure. So, the assumption that Taehyung feels suffocated by the ARMY, or that he feels like he doesn't want to be approached, is actually exaggerated and out of context. Taehyung himself on the Weverse broadcast only offered a general apology for his expression at the airport, without offending anyone specifically. There is no explicit statement that he felt disappointed with the ARMY. Instead, he emphasized that he was in a sensitive personal condition and did not want to be misunderstood. So the narrative that Taehyung is disappointed in ARMY is a one-sided conclusion drawn without any solid basis. The most important thing to note is that HYB Entertainment has never released any official statement regarding Jungkook's involvement in the broadcast or about the emotional reactions between the members. This further reinforces that issues such as Jungkook's private messages, Jungkook's tears, or previous video calls are all rooted in fan imagination and propagated without adequate verification. Why, then, can news like this be quickly spread and trusted? The answer lies in the ARMY's enormous and powerful collective emotions. When a BTS member looks fragile or goes through a difficult moment, fans around the world instantly show incredible solidarity and empathy. This is a strength of the community, but at the same time a weak point, because in an emotional state, many of them are easily touched by dramatic narratives that are not necessarily accurate. Not that all fan-based content should be in doubt. But when certain claims begin to lead to grand conclusions such as Jungkook cried, or they sent each other secret messages, there needs to be an affirmation that the narrative is not fact, but rather opinion, interpretation, or even fiction. And in the realm of journalism or responsible reporting, the distinction between opinion and fact is essential. Now, after the dust began to subside, the army was invited to be wiser. Taehyung's clarification on Weverse remains of significant value because it shows the honest and vulnerable side of a global artist. But imposing an emotional interpretation, building a narrative of tears and hidden messages without evidence, will hurt not only Taehyung, but the entire BTS. This story should be a reminder that idols are also human beings who deserve space to explain without having to be dragged into dramatic stories they didn't create themselves. As fans, it's probably best not to always insist on understanding everything, but to trust and appreciate what they choose to share. And as for Jungkook, although there is no evidence that he texted or cried because of the broadcast, we all know how much he cares about the other members. But we must also learn to distinguish between genuine love and the collective illusion we build ourselves. Because ultimately, healthy love isn't about flooding them with assumptions, but about giving them breathing room. So, did Jungkook really shed tears? Unfortunately, no one really knows. But one thing is for sure, truth doesn't need sensation to remain valuable.